Welcome to Leaders and Learners. My name is Tanya McKenzie, and you can find me at the intersection of public relations and leadership. Join us as we talk to organizational leaders, elected officials, experts, authors, artists, and personalities, sharing their stories, talking about how they got to where they are and how they continue to learn and lead the way. So without further ado, let's get into it. Greetings, good people. Welcome to another edition of Leaders and Learners, where we all know that the best leaders are lifetime learners. And today we're going to learn about something incredibly important. I am quite the skeptic. So today we're going to learn about trust. So we are all going to learn something about trust. Our guest has an extensive amount of, I'd say, personal experience, research, writing, and he's going to share that with us when it comes to trust. That's trusting others. That's trusting yourself, trusting your intuition. Sometimes it's trusting that little voice inside of you that's telling you not to trust. I don't know. I've been talking to him and I am incredibly just excited about having this conversation because there's a lack of trust in our nation, in relationships, and in self these days. So without further ado, I don't want to keep you too long, but I'm bringing on Mr. Jeff Meshel, and we're going to talk about his new book, Trust is a Double-Edged Sword. Trust me. I love it. I love the title of the book. Happy to have you here. How are you?
I'm doing terrific. Thank you. Thank you for having the pleasure of coming here to chat with you today.
Absolutely. The weather's been kind of yucky here in California. Like the sun is out, but it's a 40 something degrees, which is a little painful. I know you're on the East Coast, the opposite coast of me. What's the weather like there? It looks like it's nice, but let me know.
Today it's quite beautiful out. It's down in South Beach, Florida, and sunny, blue skies, probably about 80 degrees. Not so bad.
It sounds very inviting, but I know there's a lot of people that are still skeptical about Florida. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Skeptical in what regard?
Various different regards. Is it a great place for everyone? Is it, how some people, we in California, we get earthquakes. Y'all get something else. Like, would I be able to handle that? Like, what's going on in Florida? And are you
Well,
from there or did you move there?
I'm from New York City,
Mm.
but I've been coming here since I'm a little boy, and so I'm here often throughout my life, and I love it here. The quality of life is great. You know, the only time you really want to head out of here is if the hurricanes are coming, which it does occur, but it doesn't. It's not an often experience. For the most part, the weather's great, and my phone works everywhere, so I'd rather be here.
I love that. I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time today. Definitely want to dive into this book of yours. But first, I want you to tell me who you are. I don't usually ask that question, but looking at your upbringing, I want to give our listeners a little background on kind of how you become this amazing author.
Well, I write things or do things to make a difference. This is my third book, and my first two books are about networking, which is my passion. I love helping people, love putting people together. I've created so many things in that regard. My first book is One Phone Call Away, Secrets of a Master Networker. And I was on the Today Show. I was running all around the country doing speeches. And I've about 15,000 people in my personal database. So I collect people. Kind of like, it sounds a little silly, but I want to know who I know, and I'm always trying to make stuff happen. And I'm involved in a bunch of foundations, charities, and I've got several businesses, and my whole thing is going, going, going. In terms of writing a book about trust, which is a complete anomaly from writing books about networking, my passion, when something really horrible happens, which is what happened to me, it was the catalyst for me to really think about that word. It was a catalyst for me to say, wow, how important is trust? I mean, trust is core to everything we do in our lives, and we just don't think about it enough. So I share my horrible story of why I wrote the book with a crooked partner that I shut my company down. And people that know me know him say, this is the next Netflix series. That's how extreme it was. But then I really started thinking about trust on a macro level and how difficult things are today and how there's such little trust in our country about everything, and how media and particular movements create separation and hate and dislike. And it disturbs me immensely. So I wrote this book to make us much more aware, conscious of trust, and to react appropriately.
All right, you got to tell us about the thing that happened that triggered you to start digging into trust. Obviously, there was some mistrust. Tell us about that.
Well, I really trusted. I had a partner I know him for 20 years in my business, and I really trusted him. Uh, the word implicitly would probably describe it. He's with me for a long time. I went through a really bad divorce. He was there helping me, and he ran our day-to-day operations in the company. I'm a rainmaker. People ask what I do. I'm a salesman. I'm out there running around making things happen. He ran day-to-day ops. He had all these bizarre things happening in his life that were on a personal level that were really strange. There were things happening in our companies that I just didn't like it, and he gave me answers which I had some discomfort, and I kicked the can, or I accepted lies as truth. And ultimately, it got to an unbelievable extreme that I started really digging in, and I found out not only was he stealing and forgeries and sabotage. He had fake names, fake email addresses. He did slander things, all sorts of really extreme stuff that had to shut the company down. And his name is David Kushner, really bad guy. You Google him. His wife went off a terrace last year in Boca. Mother of three generally don't jump off terraces. The story is so incredible. People said to me that people that know me know him. Said this book, this story, should be the next Netflix series. When I was going through it and shutting down that company, um, I was standing there shaking. My blood pressure went way up and my hands were shaking. And I was standing in my window in my apartment in Manhattan at the time, looking out the window and saying to myself, God, what happened to me is so horrible, but there's no trust in this country. And I started seeing all the hatred and all the things going on. And I just started doing massive research on the word. And I go into so many things that are so relevant to everybody that people have, that have read the book have come back to me and said, in one case, you changed my life, or, this really was so meaningful. And so again, I wrote the book to make a difference.
David Kushner in New Jersey.
Yes,
Hmm. And his wife, Nancy.
correct.
Okay, I'm gonna put that link in. I'm gonna put that link in the comments for anyone that wants to read that article. But how did you meet David? Like, why would you go into business with this guy?
Well, I was in partnership with somebody else that like had a company had a different name at the time, and one of my friends introduced me to him 20 years ago, and he was moving from California back to New Jersey, where he was from. He was involved in real estate, and he came in, and we, essentially gave him a job. He really worked with my other partner more so on running our properties, and that's how it started. So, and then he grew to be a junior partner, and then I broke up with my other partner, and he became, not I was the majority partner, but he became a partner, and he ran a certain component of the business. So it matured over time.
All right, so I'll share that information with you all. But obviously, there was a high level of trust. He broke your trust. He got you thinking, and you start doing all this research. Was there never any skepticism in regards to going into business? Like, were you just not a skeptic by nature? I'm a skeptic by nature, so I'm constantly looking people up. I'm digging around. I can't get out of skepticism, more or less, because it has a lot to do with my upbringing. But for you, have you always been just optimistic and trusting? Like,
Well, the answer is that I am trusting, but I'm also wary. And I did bring in someone else that was a junior partner, and I really brought that person in sort of for checks and balances to sort of work with him and oversee him so that there'd be three people involved in the company. He kicked the can. He was very easy pushed aside, and Kushner was able to do that. And my intention wasn't fulfilled by this person. There were things that were happening that were bizarre, and it bothered me, but I just didn't step up. My gut told me that there's some things that were wrong. I get an example would be, if you Google his name, you'll see that he got arrested. He and his wife, because his son wasn't getting enough playing time on the basketball team in the school that he went to in high school. And this guy Kushner created a fake email address with a fake name and sent threatening emails to the coach, the coach's wife, and derisive emails to the school to get him fired. I don't know what the emails said, but it was threatening enough that the coach went to the local police in Cresskill, New Jersey, and they traced the email to Kushner's house, and Kushner and his wife got arrested. That you could Google and see that story. It was a talk show item, like, on the early morning show, senior real estate executive gets arrested for, chasing after, creating a fake email. And that's his wife. She's a beautiful woman. And from what I understand from her mother, the day before she went off the terrace, she finally had enough and she was going to leave him. They were going to get divorced. And the next day she was off the terrace. That's him.
And that's him, yeah.
That's
Well,
him.
I guess he looks trusting. I don't know. Is it looks? Does looks help with trust? And does is good looking a privilege? Let me ask you that.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because there's a chapter in a book called Beauty is in the Eye of the Beholder. And I address that, very attractive people from a physical perspective have advantages. I mean, beautiful women, men are very obviously compelled to them. They stand out. They get tremendous amount of attention. Good looking men, similar. They get tremendous, acknowledgement and recognition. And they actually make more money. There's statistics that say that very good looking people financially excel more so than people that are not extremely good looking. So all these pluses and benefits. The problem is, from a trust perspective, if you're relying on your physicality as the reason or the ability to succeed and to excel, what happens when we get older? What happens when it starts to go away? What happens if this was the one thing that was really the catalyst to be successful, and all of a sudden that starts to dissipate? Forget the insecurity of getting older and your physicality changing. Maybe your success gets affected accordingly. And then, of course, the Me Too movement. In New York City, I know for a fact that there are a lot of CEOs of companies that will not hire very attractive receptionists, because a receptionist could come out and just make a accusation of physical touching or flirting, whatever. And we have this thing called the Me Too movement. It doesn't matter whether you're guilty or not. You're guilty by the very accusation, and that can be very damaging. So there's real pluses to being very attractive, and then there are the negative sides or the negative things that can really affect you. And the bottom line is, trusting your physicality as being the reason for being is not really a great move.
Yeah, I feel that. So walk us down some of the takeaways that you have discovered while you were researching this book and trust.
Well, as I said, my number one thing that hit me was trust is the core to everything in our lives. It is a fundamental to everything in our lives. And the fact of the matter is, we just don't think about it enough. And so the book's about being much more aware. Another example of something that's incredibly relevant. Chapter 2 of the book, the title is "Should I Buy What I'm Sold?" And it talks about all these products out there that are marketed us with fallacious representations. It's not an anomaly. It's actually extremely common. There are no regulatory bodies that oversee what's on labels. In some cases, there are products that are sold to us that are actually hazardous. One example is suntan lotions. If you walk into any drugstore, all the suntan lotions you first see are the Copper Tone, Sun Bum, Neutrogena, all the ones that are in the front. If you get this app, and I'll share it with you, and your listeners should download this app on their phone, Yuka, Yuka. You download this app, and it has a scanning feature where if you go into a drugstore or supermarket, you scan the barcode, and the product will come up, and it'll tell you whether it's good or bad. It rates it from 1 to 100. 1 is the worst, 100 is the best. And if you've got very low ratings, it shows the ingredients that are in the product that make it have low ratings. So by example, those suntan lotions, there are hazardous ingredients in a lot of these suntan lotions, yet they're still being sold. So it will also tell you the ones that are the good ones, but you'll never see the good ones. They're not in the store like in front of you. You have to go find the place that sells the good ones. And the point is, we need to be much more conscious of what we consume, what we buy, and then, of course, what we put on our skin.
Not sure what happened there.
Yeah, lost you for a
Still
second.
going. But yucca, go back to what you were saying about yucca.
That you didn't hear the whole thing I said about Yuka?
Oh, not yucca.
So I was just saying you should go to your phone and download an app called Yuka,
Hmm.
Yuka. The app, or the when you download it, it has a scan feature, so you can go into a supermarket or a drugstore and you scan the barcode. It tells you whether the product is good or bad by rating it from 1 to 100. One is horrible, 100 is as good as it gets, and if it's bad, it'll tell you the ingredients that are in it that make it bad. So, by example, suntan lotions, all the ones in the front of the drugstore, they're all bad, and it'll tell you it has some of them have really hazardous ingredients in them, yet they're still being sold. The good ones, it'll tell you the good ones, but you'll never see them in the store. You have to go find a place that sells the good ones. Are at the bottom of that rating. You go to the supermarket, you scan different products. Certain mustards have too much salt in it, so it'll tell you too much concentration of sodium, and then they'll tell you the ones that have less salt in it. So it's a very valuable thing to have, and naturally, what we consume and what we put on our bodies is a very important thing in our lives.
I know we're talking about trust, but I also feel like critical thinking is at a minimum. I feel like people are waiting for someone to give them answers, waiting for someone to guide them instead of what we used to do. I don't know, read, research, double check. Is part of the lack of trust due to the fact that people are doing more trusting of others, or do they just not trust themselves?
Well, there's a chapter in the book about that. The title of the chapter is "Do You Trust Yourself?" I'll discuss this anecdotally, and perhaps the listeners can relate to this. I was doing a speech, really more so in my networking books and I was just in the middle of writing this book when I was introduced as the master network and all the things I've done in the past. And after the person introduced me, who knew me well, I got up and I said, "Gee, I don't really have much to say. You just learned all this about me, and that went on so long. Maybe I'll just sit down, but let me take a shot." I said, "The funny thing about being a master networker, I'm always putting people together. I have pleasure in doing it. And if I introduce you to that person over there, I'm taking a risk. If something goes wrong, it's my fault. But you know what? I'm a trusting person. I want to put people together, and I will tell you, I've done thousands and thousands of times. I could count on one hand things that didn't work that were maybe bad. I'm not stopping. I'm not stopping from being trusting, but at the same time, I've learned by my mistakes because I really trust too readily, and I've now pivoted and taught myself not to. And I start talking about the story about my crooked ex-partner, the terrible things that he did. And when I speak, I do so on an impromptu basis. What pops in my mind. I'm looking at the room. There are about 70 people there. Two tables in, there's a gentleman sitting that was dressed very nicely. And I said, "Excuse me, sir, what's your name?" And he says, "Adrian." I said, "Adrian, may I ask you a question, please?" He says, "Sure." I said, "Would you be kind enough to stand up?" And he does. I said, "Adrian, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. When I ask you the question, do you promise to give me a truthful answer?" He says, "Yes, of course." I said, "Well, again, thank you." So I move a little closer. Adrian, the question I'm going to ask you, I have a whole chapter on the question, maybe 20, 25 pages on just the question I'm going to ask you. So your answer is really important, and it's what you're going to share with everyone here. So I'm sorry to be redundant, but you promised to give me a truthful answer, don't you? And now he's getting a little ill at ease. I said, what is this guy going to ask me? He says, yeah, I do. I said, great. I move a little closer. I walk up to him and I look him directly in his eyes. I said, "Adrian, do you trust yourself?" His
Mm.
right eyebrow shot up. He looks down at his feet. He goes, "Of course I do. 1,000%. I totally trust myself. Absolutely, totally trust myself." Just like that. The entire room literally starts going like this, nodding their head up and down, like, "Oh yeah, he trusts himself." And just by you could tell by his reaction, I had this big smile on my face. So I walk over. I'm standing close to him. I say, "Adrian, it's very clear to me that you totally trust yourself. Look at you. You dress impeccably. You're clearly successful. I mean, you speak well. I'm sure you have a very successful business. You stand out. I get it. I see it. I see you totally trust yourself." I said, "Me too. I totally trust myself also. I've written 3 books. I'm on the board of a bank. I'm on the board of these different foundations. I'm on the board of this company. I've got 3 different companies. I'm a pretty successful guy. I'm just like you. I totally trust myself, just like you. I totally trust myself, except when I don't. And if I'm really honest,
Good
and
answer.
I sit back and I replay the tape of things in my life that I either did or didn't do, or certain relationships or certain things, to be honest, there are times I've not trusted myself. I said, Adrian, if you and I sit down and have a heart to heart and you really open up with me, I guarantee you, you would come to the same conclusion. He just sat there and stared at me. At the end of my whole speech and at the end of the meeting, he comes up to me, he gives me his card, he says, can we get together sometime? Can we sit down and talk? Most people, there's all sorts of things. Some people are more extreme than others, but it's trusting yourself is a very important thing. And unfortunately, most people don't.
So, how much of the distrust of self and even others, do you think comes from childhood trauma or just your childhood?
Look, clearly there's always something or someone or some point of your life that there's could be a potential blame. I was talking to a psychiatrist and she read the book and she said to me, I don't agree with you about something in this chapter. And I said, one of the points I make, I said, do you realize 65% of our population is obese? 65%. And I said, forget the physicality component of the way someone looks. If you're obese, you're putting yourself in harm's way from the perspective of fatty liver disease, high blood pressure, heart attack. It's extremely unhealthy. I make a point that if I trust myself, I want to do good for myself. I want to make sure that I'm in a good place. So my point was, I think that people that are very obese don't trust themselves, because if they trust themselves, they don't want to hurt themselves. They want to do what's best for themselves so they have a healthy, excelling life. So this psychiatrist says to me, in regard to that point, you're totally wrong. I said, oh, okay. Why? What's your opinion? She says, obese people, trusting yourself has nothing to do with it. I said, okay, what do you mean? He said, they're addicts. I said, oh, I stand corrected. They're addicts. So you're saying me, so if you're an addict, it's got nothing to do with trusting yourself, but that's the reason why you're obese. So you're saying addicts trust themselves?
Trust themselves.
And she looks at me and I said, I think you and I don't agree, and we'll move on. So
That's a good way to put it. And I think for me, a lot of my own childhood trauma. I was a gun violence survivor. I spent time in a federal witness protection program. The adults in my life did not put me as a child first. They did not sacrifice anything they wanted, anything that would interfere with their lifestyle. Not that we weren't loved, they just didn't know how to put the youth first, the young people first. So survival, obviously, and making good decisions to get myself out of those situations became me trusting myself. Well, because it worked too, so that helps. But I think I am more or less skeptical of others, particularly when I know that there are adults that are charged with the responsibility of protecting and providing and nurturing and guiding young people that continuously make bad decisions. And in my mind, if adults can make bad decisions for vulnerable, small uh, people that feed off of them, then even in business or government or law enforcement, these adults that are dealing with other adults, they definitely can be misguided and do things that break trust. So I actually have the opposite problem, which is I trust myself so much and I'm so skeptical about everybody else. Like I am untrusting. I was sexually assaulted twice. And in Black culture, it's a thing, right? It's a thing and we don't talk about it. The uncles and the pastors, and it's just a thing. So people in trusted positions in families, and we've heard about it in the Boy Scouts and churches and things of that nature. So I'm sitting back watching all these people in trusted positions that disregard trust all the time for their own selfish needs. I am trying to work on my trust for others, but it is so hard. Any feedback?
Your gut instinct, for the most part, is precise. I mean, obviously, when there are things that require heavy analytics, that gut isn't the only tool one uses. I had bad gut feelings about my crooked ex-partner, and I was totally negligent, and it wound up hurting me severely. But it was very clear there was a lot of things that were wrong, and I didn't address it. If people do things that are extremely disappointing, or they're not straightforward, or you just feel that you're getting an answer that's a lie, or misconstruing, or bringing forth things that are um, deceptive, don't go against your gut feeling, and because you're going to get hurt. So your gut feeling is a very important barometer when it comes to things. Now, at the same time, you don't want to become paranoid, so you need to, there's a balancing beam, and everything's subjective. It depends on the particular scenario.
Talk to me about your upbringing and how it actually plays a part in who you are now.
There's an expression that I use, or I think about, or I share, which is, out of adversity, you build strength.
Mm-hmm.
You can. Sometimes it works the other way. I grew up in Manhattan, came from a nice family. My parents were, they were nice people, and I loved them both. My parents, I got kidnapped when I was 4 years old, literally, FBI, the whole 9 yards. And the only thing I remember about it was they didn't do anything to me that was terrible, although they did lock me in a room in this house in New Jersey for 2 days. They did feed me, and thankfully the room did have a TV. I guess if they didn't have a TV, then I would have been really upset. Police broke down the door. I get taken to the police station. FBI, this is all over the news and TV. FBI was involved, and I wound up spending an evening in a cell at 4 years old. Not
Mm.
door locked, just in the cell until my parents came to get me. And so that was when I was 4. When I was 5, my parents got divorced. And then when I was 15, they got remarried to each other. When I was 25, they got divorced again. My mother wound up committing suicide. She was a messed up person. My father lost all of his money. And my father was having issues when I was younger. So when I was in, high school, I started working and going out there and working in a retail store and self-teaching myself. And I used to watch TV shows that were normal families, like nice things that, like, gee, why can't my life be like this? I mean, I didn't think that, but maybe subliminally I did. And I just, out of all the crummy things that were going on, I just kept trying to make myself stronger. One of the things, I'm a word guy. I love words. I've been studying words for a long time. And I have in my phone, and I have a notebook with words and definitions. I read them over and over again. I inculcate, which means learn by frequent repetition, what
Mm-hmm.
words and their definitions mean. And every time I'm listening to an audiobook or reading something, I see what I think I know what it means. I always look it up just to make it much more specific in my mind what the word means. Why? One, when you speak, you want to do so in a precise fashion that's you're on point. Two, when you read something, to know what something specifically means is important. And there's so many common words that we hear every single day that people just don't even know what the definitions are. They think they do, but they're wrong. I always test people about that with certain words, and it always is true. Very common words. So I looked to make myself stronger. I read so much. I work out 6 days a week. I'm literally going for an hour and a half to 2 hours, 6 days a week to keep myself in shape. So either you become your own best friend, or your own worst enemy. And, that's, I guess, my answer.
I appreciate you sharing that. You got kids?
I have two, son and daughter.
Do you trust them?
Yes, my son's my partner in my new company. He's a rock star.
Look at that. How's your daughter? What's she up to?
She graduated USC. She's in New York. She was working for a real estate company. She's 23. She's she's got some road to travel yet. She's learning, but she's extremely bright. And but thankfully, I'm very fortunate that my kids are really in a good place. Unfortunately, I went through the god awful divorce. I have two chapters about marriage and divorce in the book, which I'll talk about in a second. And my ex-wife went through 20 attorneys, no
Mm,
exaggeration in my divorce.
mm.
My kids were really in play, and I took all the bullets, I took care of them, and they both are really fine. And so I'm very fortunate in that regard.
How was her experience in Southern California?
She went to USC, so that was like when she got into USC. It's very unusual for kids in New York City to get to USC. So it was like she begged me to allow her to go there, and I somewhat guilty with all the crap that went down, and so I wound up giving in. I mean, she liked it a lot. The only problem was, for 2 years of her tuition stay, COVID affected. It
She was
was.
a COVID baby.
Yeah, so they didn't go to classes. They worked out of they had an apartment, so she lost the benefit of for 2 years of being in a university like that.
Yeah.
But great school, and she's doing okay.
Were you nervous? Were you worried about her at all being out here?
No, I don't I don't get nervous about stuff. I mean, I would speak to her all the time. Um, I really, she could have gone to another school, another place. I mean, it would have been just a different
Same.
venue, same sort of facts. So she's got good common sense. My kids don't get into drugs; they don't do any of that stuff, and I've been very fortunate.
Sounds like you trust your parenting a bit.
I learned as I went along. I took all the bullets, and I would do everything. But the one thing I always was very straightforward. I just say things for what they are. I tell them things that they really need to know and to be aware of. And I didn't candy coat things, and really be cognizant of what's going on out there. Now, with the world being the way it is, my son and I have all these conversations. It's really exceedingly upsetting, in so many regards, what's happening in our country. And it starts at the political situation. To me, is a mockery in this country, and the separation that's being garnered by a lot of these movements that create hatred is just, it's insane. We're our own worst enemy by what's going on, and it's all about self agenda.
I 100% agree. Um, I want to let you know how much I appreciate the work and the research and the depth of the work that you did to write this book, because so many people just they pick a subject and they write about it, or it's I get a lot of books, I get a lot of authors, and sometimes they're very aloof about the subject that they're writing about. So to know that you have gone in depth, I just want the viewers and listeners to understand that's important when you are reading about a subject or a person or whatever, a business idea, knowing that there is some uh, deep thought that has gone into it, not just, I wanted to be an author. This sounds like a very important subject to you. What are you going to do next? What are you going to do with this book? How are you going to spread the word about this book and help Americans become better acclimated to the term and the verb trust? Because the way that you make it sound, it's a verb, it's something you do. And there's actions that you take even before you trust, but it's almost like love. It's out there, but it's actually a verb. So what are you doing? What's going on? Where can we find you? How do we,
Well, look,
you got a lot going on here.
I'm being asked to write articles on subject matters. I just wrote an article comparing or the difference between intuition and common sense. That was actually took me some
Mm,
time to write this. I'm getting asked to do things that are giving me more exposure. In my first book, I was on the Today Show, so I would, this book's controversial, because I call everything out. So a lot of the TV things are because TV's got their own agenda. A lot of these news stations, whichever side they're on, they're so I just call things out. They don't necessarily want that. So I'm out there talking about it. I get tremendous satisfaction when people reach out to me, thanking me, or they're telling me how it impacted their lives. The most important book I ever read. One person left me about a 3-minute voicemail, and what's going on. And I just bought 40 books. I'm giving to my friends. One guy said to me, "This should be in all the college campuses. This should be read by everybody."
mm,
And when I get that type of feedback, then I know I'm making a difference. It's not a job for me. I'm not looking at this book like, gee, I'm going to make a fortune because the book's getting sold. I want to make a difference. You know, I'm involved in philanthropic things. I want to make a difference. So if you read the book and it makes a difference to you in your life, then I really accomplished my goal. And and so I go out there and speak to a very nice person like yourself and share this, and the people that listen to your podcast pick up the book, and it impacted them. Then I accomplished my goal.
I love that. Give me 3 words that you would never want affiliated with you.
um, 3 words. Well, it might be 3 different, like selfish, which is 2 words,
Okay.
but big ego. I don't have a big ego. I have an ego like everybody else, but I I am strong in what I believe and do, and a me person. I'm a giver. I'm not a taker. And if someone said, "Oh, he's a taker," that's completely untrue. All I try to do is to make a difference and help people, and I go out of my way. Um, Yesterday, I'm doing a transaction now, a deal where I'm lending money to someone. A really nice guy. I became friendly with him. He's completely distressed out because his son turns out to be a drug addict. He's had major problems, and I've had a heart-to-heart conversation with him yesterday, discussing about the deal I'm doing with him. He said, "Would you talk to my son? This is a business." I said, "He's drunk. It's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon." And would you talk? Would you talk? And he puts on the phone with me, and I went up to him. I said, "Listen, I can't give you the answers, but if you'd like to do a Zoom call with me, we could have a heart-to-heart conversation. It would be my pleasure. I'd like to do that." And I spoke to him for about 15 minutes, and supposedly he wants to do a Zoom call with me. This is a business deal. Making a difference, standing out, being a real person, caring about people, not just caring about yourself, is a very important thing to be. And that's who I am.
It's crazy that you wrote a book about trust, but your businesses are in more or less the real estate and finances, right? Where people also run into a lot of mistrust. How do you get people to trust you in your business?
Be successful. Do the just
Businesses.
do what you say you're going to do, and be successful and smart at what you do. I unfortunately had the bad experience with the crooked partner, and it hurt me very much because I was affiliated with him, and because of the things he did, it affected my relationship with some people. I can only do what I can do relative to my own behavior and the way I speak, what I say, and execute on. And that was a learning experience because Ronald Reagan said, "Trust but verify." And today I learned a lot by my mistakes. So I just, I keep going forward.
I love that. Well, I want to thank you for spending the time with me on the platform, for speaking to my listeners and followers, and definitely sharing your ideas, your research, your words, your thoughts. Those are all important in regards to how people take information and process it. And I hope everyone learned a little something today. If nothing else, that trust it's an action word. And we need to be more cognizant of the information we're taking in and understand that. Understand any parting words, sir? And how can the people get in touch with you?
All right. First, if those of you who say, "Gee, I'd like to learn and read this book," easy, just go to Amazon. It's there. But I just want to make you aware that as the author, I had to use a pen name. So it's Trust is a Double-Edged Sword. Trust Me by Will. And the reason I had to use a pen name is I go into so much detail about this heinous things this David Kushner did in the book that the publisher was afraid they'd get sued. So they made
Mm,
me use a pen name. So if you go to Amazon, Trust is a Double-Edged Sword, Will, it'll pop up. I implore everybody to get this. I promise you, uh, it'll make a difference in your life. And I would ask, if you do read the book, be self-reflective. Really think about your life relative to what you're reading, because this book's about us getting smarter and being more aware. You Google my name, Jeff Meshel. I'm out there. I've got a bunch of different companies. You could always email me and reach out to me. I'd be glad to be helpful to anyone that has a question, or if they're having a major issue about trust, or I'm very open. And my first book's title is One Phone Call Away. I'm one phone call away.
I like that. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for spending time. Please stay in touch. If you decide to, I don't know, go on tour or show up in LA sometime, let's get together. But know
That'd be
that
great.
whatever you have going on, we're happy to share it and support it.
And I offer you, if I could be helpful to you, I know a lot of people, and if there's speakers or that you'd like me to send your way, I might have some really good people for you. Um, I, I literally have the gamut across the spectrum of very interesting leaders and people in different areas that be really good speakers for you. So you can certainly reach out to me. You have my email address, so just
I do.
send me your V card so I can put you in my database, and we'll keep talking.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you again.
All right. Have a great day.
You too.
Ciao.
Hey, thanks for showing up to the podcast where we all know that the best leaders are lifetime learners. When you get a sec, take a moment, leave a comment. What do you think about today's episode? And share it with someone that you know could use the gems that were dropped today. Follow and subscribe. You don't want to miss who's coming up next. You never know who could show up here and what they could say. For your professional needs, marketing, PR, communications, and leadership, make sure you follow us on all social media platforms at Sand and Shores, or hit us up at sandandshores.com. Again, thanks so much for showing up. We appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.